I'm Haroen, and I will talk a bit about Firebase, and maybe if you guys can press on the next time, give a sign. Yeah. So I'm going to start with explaining what exactly is Firebase, then why you should or would you not. You don't have to use a backend as a service, but why it's useful. Then I'll explain a bit about NoSQL. What's new in the new version of Firebase, which came out about a month ago, and then I'll give a demo. So, what is Firebase? So Firebase is an API, so that means you can import that inside your web page, and then you can use all of the methods. It actually makes a backend for you, so it makes all of your data accessible in real time and fast. There's also new since the update. You can put your storage in there. So, for example, images, even video. There's quite a large tier in the free one. It also works very good with OAuth, which is the authorization with, for example, Facebook, GitHub, Google, which is easy to implement and allow you to have data which belongs to a certain user. And also new was the push notifications in an app. So it's also for apps, it's not only for on the web. So you can easily send push notifications. So why should you use a backend as a service? So a backend is a recurring cost. Not only because you have to pay, for example, €5 a month to have a whole server or even a shared server is about that cost, which requires quite some setup time. You have to install, for example, PHP, Node, and you have to learn these languages fully to be able to implement something which has a real backend. And also can be extraordinarily expensive to scale if you're hosting yourself, since Amazon, for example, pays you for what you use, which can get expensive quickly. So NoSQL, so Firebase makes use of NoSQL instead of regular SQL, which you might have heard of, in which you could say select everything from a certain table. In NoSQL, you don't use that. You request a certain URL, a certain path. For example, the root, every message of this user. So you construct a URL like that, and then you get a JSON back. So between curly brackets and a JavaScript object, in which you can add or even remove values inside that object without pre-declaring that a certain object will look like something like that. This also has disadvantages because you could make things inconsistent with each other, but that's up to you as a programmer to make consistent. So there's just one table, one large set, which you can divide yourself, for example, per user or for all the messages, and then you can take that in account, and you don't need to join different tables together, which is necessary in SQL. So in the new update of Firebase, we got a whole lot of new things. So the real-time database has always been there. This is actually the core of Firebase. And authentication works very well together with that. And now you also have the cloud messaging, storage, and the hosting, the free hosting with SSL on a custom domain, which is also new. And then some things which are mostly for apps, but they are quite inventive as well. So I won't go into it. Yeah. So now we'll do our demo. So first it's the video. So next. So I made a little chat app. I made it for another presentation too. which was still with the old version of Firebase, and now I updated it. So you log in with Firebase, and then you can see messages on both browsers, which are running in even a different version of the chat without any problems. So next. So how does this work? First we have to connect to Firebase, and we have to authorize with Facebook, listen for every message, and then we can also send new messages. So this is what it looks like in the Firebase console. So each of the messages, which is the only branch of the tree we made, so you can have messages, invites, everything you want, just a string, and you pick it yourself. So each of them are pushed inside with a message, a time, and then a user, which can branch again. You can branch as deep as you want. Of course, if you branch very deep, you could have some performance problems, so avoid going too deep or bringing too much queries in one thing. So and then so an image, URL, and a name. So next. So first we need to either in a script tag or on another way, we have to get the Firebase library, which will provide our essential functions, and then we have to initialize the app in our JavaScript with the API key, what domain we're authorizing on, which is important, and then what domain our demo is on, and then we can get our base with Firebase.database, and then the root reference, because that's the one we'll use. Okay. So how do we authorize? So first we create a new authorization provider, and we'll also ask for the public profile. That way we can get the profile pictures and the name. So once we clicked on the connect with Facebook button, this piece of code will get executed. It's behind a click event listener, on which we'll just sign in with a pop-up, and then in case we sign in correctly, then we'll just redirect to the dot. So that's to haroen.me/Firebase Demo. So that's the start, and in case there were any errors, we can catch them and then give a console error, since this normally should not happen. So how do we get the new messages? So our base, which was the root. After this, we can add our child with the messages, as we saw in the theme. And then we'll limit it to the last 10, because we don't want to have a million messages loaded on start. And then this event here, so on every child added, which increments through every object you requested. So here we requested the last 10 of the messages, and for each of those, it will do this function with a variable. You give a name yourself, so snap or snapshot, and then you can do any function you want. So here we'll do a function I'll show later, which will show the message on our page, and then with the JSON, with the object containing each of those messages. So this is how we add a message. I accidentally changed the name here and not in the previous slide. So this is add, and then this sounds a little bit complicated, but it just boils down to we get each of our data. So that's the username, the user image, the message, and the date. So then we can show it on the right, the date, and show the image by URL, etc. And then we just add it to our DOM, to our messages container, and then we'll scroll it into view. So we show messages. Now we have to send messages ourselves as well. So how we'll do that is by also going to the child of the messages, and then we'll push. So you saw earlier in the screenshot that each of those messages had a randomized string, This will get auto-created by Firebase when you use the push. So this is the recommended way to add time-sensitive data, or even any data. So we add a new JSON object, so you can see it between the brackets here, with the time, which is just the current time. We create a new time. And then our user object, which is nested, and then from Facebook, which we get authorized earlier, we get our display name and our photo URL, and then also the message. Okay, so went a bit fast through that. So next, now, so we had the message of our thing. You also have security rules. So this is something you enter in the Firebase console on the web. So you add some rules. You have three types of rules. You have write, read, and also validate. So these will get evaluated on every push or every set or every action, in fact. So then we'll only be able to read data. You read any data if we're authorized. This is to keep it safe. And then in the messages child, we'll only be able to write if we're authorized. So this is a pretty simple validation rule, but this is quite extensible and maybe a bit hard to get your head around first. This can take some time, but you can think of stuff like admins who can see everything and users who can only see themselves, or they're invited to some other user, stuff like that. You're all doing that in Firebase itself. So this presentation and the other one as well is available online, so haroen.me/presentations, and the demo as well. So I'll show the demo in a minute, and firebase.cool.com, because Firebase was bought by Google in 2014. Before that, it was a startup. So let's take a look at our not correct. Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
So here we have our demo. So we have our login page here, which will get redirected to automatically if we're not logged in. And then if we log in, gets a pop-up. Because I've already validated Facebook before, it will just get sent here, and then I can send my message in a form. And on enter, it gets submitted. So that's pretty much it, and you can easily log out as well. Okay, so that was Firebase. If you have any questions, we can do it after the rest of the presentations. En nou, Elias.
Heb jij voor mij zo de map nodig? Of zou ik dat hier?